If you've recently lost a loved one and they've passed away and did not have a will in place, you might be left wondering, what do we do now? What happens to the property? Who inherits the house? And who's in charge of all this? Well, this, my friends, is called dying intestate. And this is just a legal term saying that this person has passed away without a will. And there are some steps that you need to take to get this process started. And of course, all of this is going to stem around the property or the house involved in the estate. So that's my goal today, is to kind of walk you through those steps. First of all, what is intestate and what does it actually mean? So when someone passes away without a will, we call this dying intestate. That doesn't mean that the estate goes unresolved. It's just that there's another step involved. So this just means now that the state's intestate succession laws, that's a lot, that's a mouthful. Don't keep repeating that 5 times because you'll mess it all up. Anyway, it just means that the state's intestate succession laws are going to now determine who will be inheriting the property and the estate. Instead, had it been in a will, the decedent would have told us who those were, but now the courts have to step in. So every state has its own version of these laws, and they generally prioritize the surviving spouse and the children first. However, if they don't have a surviving spouse or children, then they'll start to move out, and then they'll go to like parents and siblings. And if there are no parents or siblings, then they're going to keep moving out to like nieces, nephews, that sort of thing. So, and distant relatives, if they can't find a spouse or children, because clearly those would be the priority when it comes to this. There is an important note that I want to also point out, that not every estate needs to go through the probate process. Some estates have named beneficiaries, such as on a deed or any financial documents. So do know that there may be documents in place that this person did set up. And if they didn't, then we're going to have to go a little bit deeper. But do know that sometimes there's joint ownership and they may just transfer automatically regardless if there was a will. So next step is, who gets appointed to handle the estate? Clearly, if there was a will, but there wasn't a trust set up, the courts, you're still going to have to go through the probate process, and the courts are going to issue what's called letters testamentary. And then that names somebody as the executor. Typically, that person was already named in the will as the executor. Now this just makes it legal. But when there is no will, the courts instead are going to issue a letter of administration. And that person is now called the administrator, clearly. Both of these duties are personal representatives, and their role, they're pretty similar. So basically, you're going to be managing the estate, paying the debts, eventually distributing what's left of the property. Usually the person is going to be a close family member. Again, we're looking for a sibling. First, we're going to be looking for spouse, then children, and then siblings, and so forth and so on. So usually a close family member is going to petition the courts to be appointed, rather than them just handpicking advanced had the decedent left instructions. So, but anyway, if you want to go a little bit deeper on this subject, I did a video called The Executor's Responsibilities, and I am going to go ahead and pin that above and also put it in the descriptions below, and it will explain a little bit more in depth of what your role is once the courts have appointed you as a personal representative. Also, something to consider, sometimes when somebody passes away and we're trying to find documents and whatnot, sometimes there's going to be a couple family members that are going to come in and they're going to start throwing things away and trying to give things away, trying to help move the process along. Please tell them not to do that. Okay, there are steps that you need to take in this probate process, and I want to make sure that you don't have somebody step out of line, especially if they weren't going to be considered as the administrator for the estate. So this might include having to change some locks and stuff. I've done a lot of videos on what you need to do, so do go back and search for those, and I will pin a couple of those also in the description below, because you really don't want people making decisions for the estate that aren't supposed to. Okay, so now let's start talking about the house. What happens specifically to the house? Of course, this is probably going to be the biggest asset to the estate. So here in Arizona, we're a community property estate. So if there was a spouse, typically the home would automatically transfer to the surviving spouse if they are on the deed. I have heard a couple stories of some friends whose parents refinanced the house. And when they did that, only one spouse was on the deed. And that's not what you want. You want to see a deed that says joint tenancy with right of survivorship or something along those lines. So make sure that you're checking out county records and making sure the deed is what the deed says. Sometimes too, you can also, if you've already started talking to a real estate agent because you know that you're going to need to sell the house eventually, they can open up pre-escrow and start doing a title search too to try to find any documentation as well. Also, there may very well be a beneficiary deed on file. So this happens a lot with, there's only one child to the to the person that's going to pass away, and they may just go ahead and record what's called a beneficiary deed. So again, that will just automatically transfer to the person on that beneficiary deed after they pass away. So if a home is owned outright and there's only one person named, then generally that property is going to have to go through the probate process, depending on the value of the home. Some states have certain laws determining the overall asset. So like if it's under $250,000, it may not have to go through the probate process. But again, these are questions that you're going to want to ask your attorney. Let me read through this real quick. Yeah, so generally you're going to have to go through the probate process, and the intestate succession laws determine which family members are going to inherit what shares. So if there's multiple children, for instance, then in many cases it's going to end up having multiple heirs. Okay, and of course, just because no will is found does not mean that the mortgage and the bills are going to stop coming. Those still have to get paid. So do make sure that you get that process started early to get a personal representative assigned, and then they can keep paying the mortgage, the property taxes, the insurance on the property. Generally, those are paid by the estate, but sometimes you need to have somebody act on behalf of the estate. Hopefully, your loved one has a signer on their accounts that can do that for you, but we want to preserve the property while all the assets are being administered and while you're waiting for all this process to go through. So just make sure that somebody is paying the bills. Next week, I'm going to dig a little bit deeper on that very subject. I'm going to do a video exactly who's responsible for paying the bills while you're going through the probate process. So make sure you tune in for that. And lastly, this process is going to take longer than you expected. I'm just going to be honest with you here. If a will had been found, clearly that speeds up the process. If there had been a trust, we wouldn't be going through any of this at all. But because there was no will found, and now the courts are going to be a little bit more involved, just know that this is going to take a little bit longer. There is more court involvement. You have to determine who the heirs are. Sometimes there's more paperwork to prove a family relationship, and there's always going to be room for disagreements among family members, sadly. And since there's no documents from the decedent of their actual wishes, just know that this can actually happen. I'm not trying to scare you. I'm really not. I'm just trying to help prepare you so that you can be upfront with family and be able to provide some realistic expectations to them to say, okay, this is what I learned on YouTube. Just know you're not alone, okay? Get professionals involved very early on in the process. You should not be trying to go through this alone. It is going to be pretty important for you to get a probate attorney hired very early on. And again, the estate is going to be paying for all these things. Hopefully, there is money in the estate to pay for these items. And then from there, just follow the steps. Make sure you're not don't put the cart in front of the horse and try to knock things out that you think are more important. Start with the attorney and the court process way before anything else. And like I said, next week we are going to be covering who is going to pay the mortgage and the other bills during this probate process. So do make sure you tune in for that. You can get reminded by subscribing and hitting the bell. If you got any value out of today's video, by all means, go ahead and give it a like. That helps YouTube make sure that these videos are getting in front of the right people that need to see this information. If you have any questions at all, or if you need help finding a professional in your area, I am a real estate agent here in the Phoenix metro area, and you may not be here, and that's okay. I'm happy to try to connect you with some resources in your particular area of where you're trying to sell an inherited home. So don't hesitate to reach out. I'm always going to be a resource for you. Any comments? Please, by all means, comment below. If you have any ideas for future episodes that you would love for me to discuss, go ahead and drop those in the comments as well. I look forward to seeing you next week. Have a great day.